Hello, today I'm going to talk about 3 dairy products that you should consider eating because they can support health, and that means they can support your longevity. Yogurt, cheese, and wait for it, ice cream. Hard to believe, right? Well, science and the evidence says otherwise. Let's dive in. First of all, let's talk about what a dairy product is. A dairy product is anything that's made from cow's milk, like butter, cream, milk, yogurt, cheese, ice cream, whipped cream. You get it. All of those types of things are originally coming from cow's milk. Now, a lot of people think that dairy products are unhealthy, and this is not a new thought. And in fact, it's somewhat grounded in science and fact. So let's talk about why that is. Well, a number of reasons. People have actually invoked the fact that milk products, dairy products, have saturated fats. True. Dairy products can contain antibiotics. I'm going to talk about that. There can be growth hormones and bovine proteins that the human body isn't familiar with, right? You've heard that old saying that humans are the only animal that drink another animal's milk, not only as a child, but going all the way into adulthood. So all of that is actually true. So let's talk about some of these concerns and take a look at which ones actually are grounded in fact. First, let's talk about saturated fat. It is true that dairy does contain saturated fats. But as it turns out, saturated fats may not be as bad as we once thought it was. Researchers now think that it's more important how your body handles saturated fats, and everyone's body handles it slightly differently. This is actually a kind of an area of controversy in health and wellness and metabolism. But we do know that too much saturated fat isn't good for you. So high consumption of dairy products is clearly not going to be healthy. The saturated fats remain a concern, although we're beginning to actually try to think more carefully about it. All right. Well, milk does actually have health benefits. For example, milk itself has been shown to help bone development and bone health, especially in children. And that's partly because milk is fortified with vitamin D and it's a source of calcium. What about antibiotics? Antibiotics are actually given by dairy farmers to cows, often in order to be able to prevent bacterial infection. That makes sense if you're the dairy farmer, you don't want sick cows. And the antibiotic that's commonly used is penicillin, which you can actually find in some milk products. Now, there are 2 problems with actually finding antibiotics like penicillin in your milk product. Number 1 is that some people are actually sensitive to antibiotics like penicillin. They can have antibiotic allergies. And while it's rare for milk drinkers to actually have an antibiotic reaction, it's true, it could cause a reaction if you come into contact with the antibiotic that you're actually allergic to. Now, more importantly, and secondly, is that the wide use of antibiotics in agriculture, in that industry, contributes to the development of antibiotic resistance sort of in the public health realm. And that's a problem because if you overuse antibiotics, and you encourage bacteria to develop that are resistant to that antibiotic, then when we need that antibiotic, guess what? It's less likely to be effective. And that puts us into a dilemma to be able to find other antibiotics that are actually more effective. So we don't want to be chasing our tail. And that's why I think the judicious use of antibiotics is something that we're looking for. And if you can find the antibiotic in a milk and then it contributes, a lot of people drink milk products, that can be a problem. All right. So the concern about antibiotics is it's valid, but it's actually mostly important from a public health perspective. What about growth hormones? Now, some dairy farmers do use growth hormones to be able to help to increase milk production. Makes sense if you think about it from the production perspective, like the business perspective. You want your cows, which are expensive to raise and keep, to be able to make as much milk product as possible, right? It's like if you own a car factory, you want the factory to be able to slam out as many cars as possible. Okay, so how do dairy farmers do this? Well, they can inject a biosynthetic chemical called a growth factor. In this case, specifically, it's called recombinant bovine somatotropin. This is actually a growth hormone that's naturally produced by the cows, but we can actually create it synthetically, inject it, and the domino effect of that hormone is actually more milk production. So that's actually good for the company's perspective. All right. Now, the idea that this could be harmful, it was that like, well, I don't want to have this kind of growth hormone in the milk that I'm drinking or the dairy product that I'm actually consuming, right? Well, that's actually not the problem. In fact, the treatment of cow using recombinant bovine somatotropin growth hormone isn't really a problem in terms of it appearing in the milk product. It usually doesn't. It breaks down pretty quickly. But here's the thing, and I'm telling you this as a scientist, that bovine somatotropin treated cow milk does contain higher levels of another growth hormone that's a downstream result of the first growth hormone, okay? And that is insulin-like growth factor 1, something called IGF-1, all right? Now, this is another pathway that the bovine hormone actually stimulates, and that's also found at higher levels in milk. And why is that a concern? It's kind of a theoretical concern, but as a researcher, when you look at the data coming out of laboratories, what we do know is that when lab animals with tumors are exposed to IGF-1, which can be found in milk, treated with these hormones, all right, the IGF-1 causes tumors to grow faster. Not a good thing, right? We haven't actually shown that this actually happens in humans consuming milk, but it's a theoretical concern that's in the lab. And therefore, my recommendation is that it's better not to drink milk from bovine somatotropin or BST treated cows. Look for another choice, because when it comes to a disease like cancer, why take the chance at all, right? Okay. Now, we just talked about growth hormones, antibiotics, saturated fats. These are the traditional concerns that people actually have about dairy products, all right? And some people, by the way, don't eat dairy products because they are vegans, and that is actually a principled approach to not eating dairy. So that's another reason why people don't want to have dairy. But this video is about what are the dairy products that you should eat and why. So I do want to tell you that there is some surprising scientific research that's been done on milk, and there are proteins in milk like lactoferrin. Now, lactoferrin is a milk peptide that actually does a lot of different things. They say that it actually can slow tumors down, lowers inflammation. There may be improvements for immunity. This is mostly lab research. And something that I find pretty impressive is that lactoferrin has been shown in the lab to improve healing by stimulating healthy angiogenesis. That's how the body grows blood vessels. Angio, blood vessel, genesis, how blood vessels grow. If you've ever had a cut and you had to have it heal, you needed new blood vessels or angiogenesis to grow to be able to help that healing. And in fact, if you've ever scraped your knee and had a scab on it and had that scab come off too early, it's bright red bubbling underneath it, right? And that's a bird's eye view when you look at it of blood vessels, thousands of blood vessels growing up in order to be able to bring oxygen and nutrients to be able to help stimulate healing in that tissue. So lactoferrin has actually been studied in the wound healing field. I also do wound healing research as well as cancer research. And I've been impressed. Lactoferrin seems to have a lot of benefits. Now, whether or not it actually translates into benefits of drinking milk, we don't know, all right? But if you think about it, the biology makes a lot of sense. A cow creates milk. The milk is consumed by the baby cow. And if there's some healing properties that could be baked into the milk, why not actually have something like lactoferrin that could potentially heal stomach or gastrointestinal tract of a baby cow, all right? Now, the anti-tumor effect is interesting because it's anti-angiogenic. So think about what I told you just now. Lactoferrin can stimulate angiogenesis for healing, but there's also some anti-tumor effects and anti-angiogenic effects. So it depends on the context. And that's why this is really complicated, and it's all still in the laboratory. So I'm just sharing with you some of the research done on milk that actually shows that there may be some really beneficial properties that are still untapped. Okay, so I'm setting all this up to basically say that there are some products that we can actually consider that might be beneficial for health. But let's not look at the lab. Let's look at the clinic, and let's look for clinical evidence. That's what I always try to emphasize. If you're looking for foods that can actually benefit health, food is medicine, there's a ton of research, all right? What happens in the cells or to a fruit fly or to a rat, completely different than what might happen in a human. So why don't we just jump and focus on what actually happens in humans? All right, so you ready for the 3 dairy products I think you should consider because they can support health and therefore help to support longevity. And I'm going to explain how in every case. All right. Are you ready? Let's dive in. All right. The first dairy food that you should consider adding to your life is yogurt. All right. Now, most people know what yogurt is. It's a fermented milk product. And because it's a fermented product, that means it's a probiotic food. Now, we know probiotics are important for health because by definition, probiotics actually contain healthy bacteria that when we consume them, build our own body's healthy gut bacteria. All right, that's 39 trillion bacteria that live in our gut. Now, it's the lower part of the gut. So the gut starts in the mouth and ends at the anus. All right, it's about 40 feet long. The last third of it is like a gut that has a colon in it. And the colon is the largest part of the gut, the large intestines. And there's a particular part of the colon called the cecum. It's kind of like a sacky area, a loose sac. It's where the appendix kind of comes out of. And that's where a lot of your healthy gut microbiome actually live. 39 trillion, a lot of them live right there, right by the appendix. And one of the things that you might find interesting is that we used to think of the appendix as kind of a useless, I was taught it as a vestigial organ, meaning at some point in evolution, it probably had a role. Now, we're humans and much more advanced. We probably don't need it. Kind of like the tonsils, right? No biggie. Let's get rid of it. And so a lot of surgeons used to just take out the appendix because if we don't have an appendix, you'll never have appendicitis. All right. Now, let me tell you, because the appendix is in the cecum, and there's some tissue in the appendix that we think is involved with the microbiome and the immune system, we're beginning to rethink whether or not the appendix might actually have an air traffic control mechanism for the gut microbiome. Imagine that's true. And this is what's so fun about learning about the body is that we're making new discoveries all the time. All right. But microbiome in the lower gut, in the colon, and probiotic foods like yogurt actually help to build healthy gut bacteria. And we're going to talk more about that in a second in terms of what the consequences are. But let's talk about yogurt a little bit more. What is yogurt? It's fermented. How do you actually make yogurt? Well, I'm not going to describe the factory approach, but I'll just tell you the basic approach because yogurt has been made in some way, shape, or form since the ancient Greeks. All right. It's like in papyrus papers and the Egyptians as well. But the bottom line is that you take milk, you heat it up, all right, and then you add beneficial bacteria, exposed to beneficial bacteria. Today, we actually use specific bacteria like Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus, all right? These are 2 classic yogurt-making bacteria. And once you expose it, then you let the bacteria that you add, the healthy bacteria, work with the warm milk. You let it set for a few hours, and that's when fermentation takes place, right? Fermentation is often a reaction with sugar to create an acid, right? That's what actually happens in wine, right? Fermentation. Well, in this case, the bacteria in the warm milk take the lactose, which is a milk sugar, and converts it to lactic acid, all right? And the moment there's lactic acid, think about what happens. You add acid to milk. All right, it turns into kind of a thicker substance, changes the texture, kind of like creamy. All right, and lactic acid gives yogurt its classic tart flavor because it's an acid. Right, so that's basically how yogurt is made. I'll leave it at that. All right, but it gives you an idea of why the healthy bacteria are actually in there. Now, this idea of healthy bacteria in yogurt being associated with longevity dates all the way back, back to a researcher named Elie Metchnikoff. All right, this is in the early 1900s. Metchnikoff actually won the Nobel Prize in 1908. He was working on the immune system, which is, of course, connected to your gut microbiome. But Metchnikoff actually observed that Bulgarian monks, all right, Eastern European monks, actually ate a lot of yogurt, and it was known at the time that they often lived to really, really ripe old ages. And so he thought maybe there was something in the milk, the yogurt, the fermented milk product, that actually was leading to this improved survival. So one of the things that Metchnikoff did is he studied the bacteria in Bulgarian yogurt, and it was Lactobacillus bulgaricus. And he proposed that this might be one of the healthy bacteria in the gut that was associated with longevity. All right, so the quest for longevity has been going on for millennia. All right, humans have been looking for ways to live longer forever. But here was a scientist, a really smart one who won the Nobel Prize eventually, who started to put together maybe there's something about healthy gut bacteria that could actually help you live longer. Now, that really was one of the early points in history where the microbiome was actually being considered. And a lot of work's been done since then, but for the purposes of this video, I want to actually just present some of the clinical evidence, right? Rubber meets the road, clinical evidence that yogurt actually is important for your overall health and in ways that can support longevity, right? First of all, yogurt has been clinically shown to improve bone health. And why is bone health important? Well, it's because as we get older, our bones actually get a little weaker, right? So osteopenia, osteoporosis, our bones are continuously being made by the body and also broken down by the body. So it's sort of building it, breaking it down, building it, breaking it down, renewing. That's basically what happens to our bones all the time, all right? And our bones, by the way, are the scaffolds that our muscles hang on. So when we're exercising and moving around, we need our bones to actually create the structure for our skeleton. And that's why, by the way, astronauts can get weak because they're not actually standing with gravity on solid soil. And so the bones get weak and they start to break down some more. But as we age, that's a process that also happens, all right? Now, a study of 4,310 adults showed that people who ate more yogurt had a higher bone mineral density. That's the buildup of the bone, all right? And this is particularly seen in women. And women are more likely to suffer from osteoporosis than men. So this is actually a useful observation. And the research showed that women who ate one or more servings of yogurt per day, all right? So that's a yogurt in the morning. They had a 3 to 4% higher bone mineral density score. Now, the bone mineral density score is something that doctors use to be able to assess, that's part of the equation, to assess how well your bone metabolism is, your skeletal structure, and your overall health. Now, specifically in this study, the women had the improvement in bone mineral density in the hip and also in the femoral head. Now, the hip is sort of the pelvis area. The femoral head is sort of the femur, is the long bone of the leg, and the femoral head is the part that actually attaches the long bone of the leg to the hip. And these two areas, the hip and the femoral head, are exactly where hip fractures are likely to take place. All right, I know this because my mom had a fall and she actually broke her hip right in the femoral head. Now, falls in elderly people really cut short longevity. So as you get older, your bones get weaker, and if you have a fall, all right, and people do fall, right? If you don't have enough bone mineral density in those areas, you can break a hip. You break a hip, it really is the beginning of the sort of, for many people, their health downfall overall. They get less mobile, they get blood clots, they wind up having other problems that come up. It is really a bad situation as we get older. So as for longevity and for quality of life and independence and not being in a wheelchair, not having to have surgery, all those things kind of start chipping away at your longevity. Good bone strength, okay, is all, which is coupled with good muscle strength, is really important. And so yogurt has been shown to be beneficial in building bone mineral density. All right, that's really important. All right. Now, the other thing is that yogurt consumption has been associated with better metabolism as well. Metabolism is really sort of our body's use of fuel to be able to produce energy, to be able to run our engine, okay, to help us get around. But also, a metabolism gives us that extra capacity of energy to be able to do activities that we enjoy, right? So if you want to live long, you want to live well, you need to actually have enough of a good metabolism. So yogurt consumption has been correlated with lower body weight, okay, so less obesity, smaller waist circumference. Now, why does that matter? Your waist circumference, that's like the belt size, all right, basically reflects the tube of your body, right? Our bodies all are basically a tube, all right? And your circumference is a reflection of metabolic health, because when you have a lot of excess body fat in the tube of your body, what does it do? It expands your waist circumference. It stretches out your circumference, right? It's like a suitcase you're trying to stuff. It's going to push the sides out. That's why waist circumference actually is a measure of metabolic health. Yogurt consumption is associated with smaller waist circumference, which basically is associated with smaller amounts of harmful visceral fat. The visceral fat is the inflammatory fat, so less of that is actually better, okay? And overall, yogurt consumption associated with lower body mass index. That is one of the classic measures of metabolic health. It's not the only one, but that's actually an important one, okay? So better metabolism, better bones. Now, and yogurt's also heart healthy, all right? That's pretty important, because remember I told you dairy products are suspected to maybe not be heart healthy because of the saturated fat that's in it. Well, there is evidence to show quite the opposite is true. There was an analysis of 39 different clinical studies, all right, including meta-analyses. This is like really detailed, deep dive into all the studies and comparing them and putting all the data together. And the evidence is overall that yogurt is heart healthy. And here's the reason why. Yogurt lowers harmful cholesterol. That's LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol. Yogurt consumption lowers that harmful cholesterol, all right? And yogurt also reduces the total cholesterol in your blood. Yogurt also lowers triglycerides. So these things, LDL, harmful cholesterol, total cholesterol, and triglycerides, when they're high, that's a risk factor for heart disease. So eating yogurt actually lowers those risk factors by improving lipid profile. Very important. And obviously, as you know, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer. All right. So you want to live long, you want to dodge the heart disease, and you want to live for a long period of time. You also want to have lower blood lipids, because high blood lipids are also connected to impaired brain function, poor brain health as well, including dementia, right? So these are all those elements of longevity. I'm not talking about precisely adding up the years. I'm talking about, as we get older, how to actually support health and longevity together. It's a very important area. I'm actually doing research on this right now, and the nuances are really, really important. Now, the other thing that yogurt consumption has been shown to do that's heart healthy is that eating yogurt lowers your blood pressure. All right, very, very important. Very important benefit to that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about blood pressure in just a few minutes. So yogurt's good, right? Now, if you're going to get yogurt, let me just tell you that I recommend that you get whole fat yogurt, 100% yogurt, all right, and not the low fat kind. Now, this is might seem like kind of a crazy idea, but here's what it is. You go to the grocery store and you go to the yogurt section and open the door, in the refrigerator section, you'll see it's almost all low fat yogurt. That's where the demand has been. So the grocery stores actually stock it, and the yogurt manufacturers make tons of low-fat yogurt. But you think that low-fat will be better for you, right? Lower saturated fat, but that's actually not true. Low-fat yogurt actually results in higher cholesterol, and High-fat yogurt, like the whole Greek yogurt, which is what I like to actually eat, the whole yogurt, which is 100, it's got all the fat in it, actually doesn't raise your total cholesterol. So let's talk about that a little bit because that's important, right? You want to be able to make the right selection if you're going to have a health and longevity supporting dairy product like yogurt. How do you know which ones to choose? I think most people probably reach for the low-fat yogurt automatically, but I'm telling you to reach for the whole fat. Now, here's the reason. When you remove fat from a dairy product, like what happens when you go from whole milk to 1% or 2% milk? It thins right out, right? You can tell the difference. If you have a glass of whole milk, pure whole milk, versus a glass of 1% or 2% milk, the 2% milk tastes okay, if you're a dairy person, but it's very thin. And when it comes to yogurt, which actually is thick, it's got kind of a creamy texture to it. When you remove the fat, what do you think happens? Well, it's just like in regular milk. It thins it out, and so it collapses the yogurt into a texture that doesn't taste very much or feel very much like yogurt. So the manufacturers often add emulsifiers. That's another word for thickeners to it. Carrageenan, polysorbate 80. There's a whole bunch of different types of emulsifiers that are used in the food industry in order to be able to thicken the yogurt, the thinned out yogurt. So first you thin it out by removing the fat. Then you add these emulsifiers, these chemicals to it to thicken it back up again. And now the consumer, that's you, will actually think it's got the mouthfeel of regular yogurt with less fat. Okay, that might be good, except that these emulsifiers are now being shown to hurt the gut microbiome. The very thing that yogurt's supposed to improve when you add the emulsifiers, and this is the classic problem of ultra-processed foods, addition of elements that might not be so good for your body. Your body might not react well to it. And we're beginning to find out that many of these emulsifiers can actually harm the gut microbiome. Now, this is a problem because our gut microbiome, actually a healthy gut bacteria, actually helps to manage blood lipids, right? Manage your blood cholesterol, manage your blood sugar. It helps, your body have insulin sensitivity, use the glucose normally, helps to lower inflammation, helps to boost healthy immunity, text messages our brain to send signals for social hormones. Good, healthy gut bacteria is super important for all kinds of functions, all right? So you get an emulsifier or any chemical in a ultra-processed food that disrupts or derails the gut microbiome. What actually happens is that it impacts the metabolism. Specifically, if you damage the gut microbiome in the context of eating low-fat yogurt with emulsifiers, what happens is that the gut microbiome gets derailed. It becomes a situation called dysbiosis, unhappy or sick microbiome. Now your blood lipids are not being properly finessed by your microbiome. It can't do its job, right? So what happens is your blood cholesterol goes up. And that's exactly what they find with low-fat yogurt. It's supposed to be low-fat, but actually doesn't benefit you that way. In fact, your cholesterol actually goes up. In contrast, whole-fat yogurt, which you would think actually it's got more cholesterol in it, probably not going to be good, right? Actually, your cholesterol levels go down. Okay, I told you this already. It's been shown in the clinic. Now, the reason it goes down is because of the probiotic effect of the whole yogurt contributes to your healthy gut microbiome without any damage to the gut microbiome. It doesn't have any emulsifiers. And now your gut bacteria can work even better. So even though you're eating saturated fat, your body has been activated in a way through the gut microbiome to be able to process that fat better, okay? Now, what's the consequence of damaging your gut microbiome, having your blood lipids go up, all right? And also with the damaged gut microbiome, your levels of inflammation go up, your immunity actually goes down. The consequence is that your higher cholesterol, all right, higher blood sugars, metabolic syndrome actually increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. So here you are trying to make the better choice for low-fat yogurt. In fact, it actually backfires on you for reasons that we're just starting to figure out right now. All right. So overall, yogurt's good. Get whole yogurt all the time. And basically what I tell people is if you're going to buy yogurt, you're not going to make it yourself, you're going to buy it, regardless of what it is, all right? Look for the whole yogurt, like I like whole Greek yogurt. Pick up the package before you put it in your cart and look at the ingredient label, all right? it'll show you everything that's there. And if there's anything added to the yogurt you're not comfortable with, put it back and choose another one, all right, that doesn't have the stuff that makes you uncomfortable, all right? Now, a couple of other kind of pro tips, health pro tips when it comes to buying yogurt, all right? Just get a whole plain yogurt, all right? Don't get the kind that's got pre-sweetened, it's got a fruit layer, you pick it up and there's like the strawberry jelly in the bottom or blueberries in there, and then all you gotta do is stir it up and now you got a sweetened yogurt. No, because those fruit layers actually have a lot of added sugar, and they may have other artificial chemicals in there, including artificial coloring, artificial preservatives, maybe even artificial flavoring to make the strawberry flavor more intense or the blueberry flavor more intense. So don't go for that, because that kind of, again, could damage your gut microbiome, and you don't want to be doing that. A whole yogurt, if you want to actually put fruit in it, do what the Greeks do, all right? Just get a whole ripe fruit, all right, seasonal fruit, slice it up, and you can actually just put it right on top of the whole yogurt, all right? Very, very simple. And one of my favorite ways is to have a whole yogurt, slice some fresh seasonal fruit, and actually it's a great opportunity, and the Greeks do this as well. Take some tree nuts, pistachios, walnuts, almonds, pecans, crush them up, and you can sprinkle it right on top of that yogurt, all right? So you got the whole yogurt, you got some sprinkling of nuts, you got some fresh cut whole fruit. Look, you're building your own flavor profile, and now you get the sweetness of the fruit, but you also get the polyphenols from the fresh fruit. You get the dietary fiber, which is a prebiotic. So now the yogurt's probiotic, the fruit is prebiotic, and you're getting the polyphenols as well. All good, right? The polyphenols activate other aspects of your health, all to support longevity. So that's what I actually recommend that you do. That's what I do when I'm actually having yogurt as well. So add fruit that you source yourself in order for that sweetness. And you want to add a little extra to it. You know, what I recommend is to actually use some honey. Get some organic honey and just drizzle a little bit on there. And now you'll get the honey, which also has good bioactives. You got the fruit, you've got some crushed tree nuts. Now you got the probiotic yogurt. That is what's really, really good for your health. And you just start your day off like that, really kickstarting it, having all kinds of things that are good for your gut and good for your health and support your longevity, supported by the evidence I discussed earlier with you in terms of the cholesterol, the blood pressure, building bone strength. Yogurt, lots of goodness when it comes to yogurt. All right, let's talk about the second dairy food that you might want to consider to support health and longevity. Now, and that is cheese. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you why, and there's some big caveats that I'm going to tell you with it. So I'm not trying to be provocative or controversial. I'm just telling you where the evidence actually is, and then giving you some practical tips on how to be cautious about this. All right. What you want to do is to take a look at the kind of cheese and why would it might be good for you. First, cheese is a milk product that is fermented, right? That's how cheese is actually made. The cheese in the cave, it's got bacteria growing on it, healthy bacteria that actually help the cheese mature and ripen. And some cheeses have bacteria that we know are absolutely healthy for you. So there's a good healthy bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri, L. reuteri, normally found in the gut, in a healthy gut. But it's also used in foods. For example, it's used in sourdough bread. Lactobacillus actually creates lactic acid, all right? And that lactic acid, which is the same thing in yogurt, actually is what gives sourdough bread its tanginess, the stuff people really like about it. But when it comes to cheese, it turns out that Lactobacillus reuteri is the starter bacteria used to make Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. That's the original Parmesan cheese from Italy. Now, I'm not talking about the manufactured stuff that's pre-grated for you, but if you went to a cheese shop, like a real cheese shop, and you look for Parmigiano Reggiano, the real stuff imported from Italy, it's pretty expensive, all right? And it comes in these big orange wheels. I mean, like I'm talking about wheels that look as big as a truck, an 18-wheeler truck wheel, All right, they lay them on their side, and it's when it's cut open into pieces and packaged, it is slightly crumbly. It's got a little graininess. It's got a kind of really wonderful umami saltiness to it. I'm sure you probably have had the opportunity to taste Parmesan cheese, but if you haven't tasted the real Parmesan Reggiano, that's what I would actually suggest, because it actually also contains Lactobacillus reuteri. Now, why is Lactobacillus reuteri good? Well, I actually studied Lactobacillus reuteri in the lab with a colleague at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology some years ago, and we've actually found that L. reuteri actually helps your body heal. All right, we did a wound healing model where there was punch biopsies, and then we fed Lactobacillus reuteri in the drinking water to these animals. They were just up there drinking their water with the bacteria. We're giving them probiotics, frankly. And guess what? The animals who were drinking the water that had Lactobacillus reuteri healed a lot faster than the animals who were drinking from water bottles that had no probiotic in it. So L. reuteri, healthy gut bacteria, probiotic, found in Parmesan Reggiano cheese, actually helps healing. Now, here's where my caution to you actually comes in. It's not healthy to actually eat lots and lots of Parmesan Reggiano cheese, or any cheese, frankly. It's very salty, does have saturated fats. All right. So you get a huge salt load as well as a saturated fat load along with it. But think about it. You can grate the cheese. You can nibble on the cheese a little bit. The cheese plate, for example, this is not something you sit there and snarf down. But Parmesan Reggiano is one of those cheeses. It's a probiotic cheese. Here's another one. Camembert cheese is a French cheese. It's a soft cheese. You can spread it on a cracker, for example. It's got beneficial bacteria, good for your gut, like Lactobacillus casei and bifidobacteria. You don't need to memorize the names of these bacteria. Just know that researchers like me, who study food as medicine and study gut health, we've actually been able to identify the specific types of bacteria, and we can pronounce them usually, that are found in these various foods. So Camembert cheese has been found to actually improve gut health by introducing some of its bacteria as well. Now, remember I told you, when you actually feed the gut bacteria, your microbiome well, support it with other bacteria, one of the things is a healthy gut bacteria produces a metabolite. So this is the metabolite of the bacteria. One of them is the whole group of metabolites are called short chain fatty acids, or SCAFAs, SCFAs, SCAFAs. And SCAFAs get released in the body. You know what they do? They lower inflammation. So good gut health lowers inflammation. And by lowering inflammation, you're actually lowering the risk of chronic diseases. And if you want to live long and prosper, you got to actually try to dodge all those chronic diseases. You know which ones I'm talking about. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Those are some of the chronic diseases that are associated with inflammation. Dementia, another one, right? So that's why healthy gut bacteria is actually good. A little bit of Parmesan Reggiano never hurts, always helps, and certainly helps the food taste better, and may have some benefits as well if you have it in moderation. The other thing, by the way, is that healthy gut bacteria improve insulin sensitivity. We talked about that as well. Now, the other benefit of cheese, besides the probiotic benefits, is that some cheeses, like hard cheeses, contain a special kind of vitamin that can help your body starve cancer by cutting off the blood supply, and an anti-angiogenic vitamin. All right. The vitamin is called vitamin K2. All right. It's a special form of vitamin K. And the types of cheeses that have this are hard cheeses. Emmentaler, which is like a Swiss cheese. Jarlsberg cheese. Gouda cheese. Gouda is actually pronounced Gouda in the Netherlands. Those actually contain vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 cuts off the blood supply to tumors, anti-angiogenic benefits. And so this is actually yet another benefit of actually eating it. Again, not by eating huge chunks of cheese. It's really by eating slices, a couple of slices like they do in Europe. Sometimes there's a couple of slices of cheese you could actually have for breakfast, not eating huge chunks of it. This is not a pizza with extra cheese put on it. All right. Okay. So I talked to you about different kinds of cheeses. We talked about Parmigiano Reggiano. We talked about Camembert. We talked about hard cheeses like Emmentaler, Jarlsberg, Gouda, or Gouda cheese. But what's the evidence? What's the evidence that eating cheese is not bad, right? So let's start with that, because most people would assume that eating cheese is not good for your health. What's the evidence that eating cheese is not bad and maybe even good? Well, there is a really, really great review article written in 2023 in the journal Advances in Nutrition. What they did is they looked at 39 clinical research studies looking at cheese, and they found that eating cheese was associated with some statistical benefits, all right? It was associated with a 7% decrease in mortality from cardiovascular disease, decrease in mortality. Eating cheese was also associated with an 8% reduction in developing coronary artery disease, all right? Cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease. These are things that can prevent you from actually enjoying longevity, all right? So here is a dairy product, cheese, that have been shown to actually lower the risk. The amounts of risk that's lowered, not huge, all right? And that's why you got to be cautious about how much cheese you eat. You get a little bang for your buck, but you don't want to actually get a lot of the harm out of by overeating cheese as well. Now, studies have also shown that eating cheese has been associated with a 7% reduction in the risk of stroke, right? Heart attack, stroke, these are major causes of morbidity and mortality in elderly people. So you want longevity, you want to be able to, every little bit of edge you can get to lower your risk for that is very important. Also, eating cheese really associated with a 7% decrease in the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, an 11% decrease in the risk of developing estrogen receptor negative breast cancer. Now we're beginning to talk about some serious conditions, right? And eating cheese is associated with a 19% reduction in the risk of developing dementia. Brain health, this is like the whole new frontier. Who would have thunk that actually eating cheese can actually be beneficial against these types of conditions, everything from diabetes to breast cancer to dementia. And that's where the evidence actually is. Now, you might be saying at this point, wait a minute, there's something that doesn't smell right here. Like, I know eating cheese isn't great for you. Nobody should be going out to eat cheese. You are right that nobody should be going out to eat a lot of cheese. All these kind of evidence I'm telling you is really just, I'm stating the facts. This is what the science says. It might be surprising to you, but it is what it is. And there's a reason for it. And gut health is one of those reasons. But whatever it is, you want to get some benefit from cheese. Don't eat too much of it. That is the absolute key to this. Too much cheese gives you too much saturated fat, too big a salt load, and that increases your risk for high blood pressure. And then when you have high blood pressure, guess what? That's the silent killer. That actually takes away any benefit you might get, because high blood pressure is a risk factor for stroke. And the way that happens is that when you get high blood pressure, your heart's going to have to pump extra hard against that super pressure that's pushing back against it. When your heart pumps hard, it's got to jet the blood out. When blood is jet out through your blood vessels, there is something called a shear force, right? This is kind of like the, when an airplane flies by, right? This is shear force. When blood has to be shot by like that through your blood vessel, the shear forces can actually damage the lining of the blood vessels. Now, a couple of things can happen. Number one, when you damage the lining, it makes it easier for the blood to stick to the lining. That's a setup for a blood clot. All right. That blood clot can then lead to a stroke when it happens in your brain. It's called an ischemic stroke with a blood clot. Now, the other thing that your shear force does, that you damage the blood vessels in a way that can make the blood vessels bleed. That's called a hemorrhagic stroke. That's a much actually worse kind of stroke to have in some ways. The clots can actually dissolve and you can get the blood flow again, or your body, your brain can find ways to grow blood vessels around it. You get a hemorrhagic stroke, bunch of blood in your brain. That actually can be a much more serious thing. High blood pressure, avoid it. Avoid having too much of a salt load. When it comes to cheese, which is very salty, don't eat too much of it, even though there's some benefit to it that can support longevity. Everything in moderation, especially cheese. Now, I actually enjoy cheese, all right? I find cheese very pleasurable. I like the different tastes of it. It's actually found in a lot of Mediterranean cuisine, right? And countries, cultures. And guess what? Traditional Mediterranean diet, which does contain cheese, is one of the healthiest diets in the world, right? But in moderation. If you're going to eat cheese, like a slice, just 1 or 2 slices a day max. That's it. Maybe even less. All right. Hey, check this out. I've got a guide on the 5 small daily habits that boost brain health and prevent cognitive decline. And it's free. I share simple, easy to use recommendations that you can add to your routine today. These are habits that I use personally, and it's yours right now for free in the caption below. All you have to do is click on the link below the video. And there's one other caution I want to give you about cheese. Avoid these ultra-processed cheese products like spray can cheese. You know what I'm talking about, like the kind of cheese that when you were a kid, you might have gotten and pressed out the nozzle at the top, and you could put it onto a cracker, right? That's not good. And the reason is that those types of cheeses usually contain corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, artificial colors, because even though it actually could be real cheese, it's an ultra-processed product of the cheese, and they add things to it. Those additives, artificial colors, emulsifiers, we talked about emulsifiers in yogurt. Again, in some of these spray can cheese products, avoid those. Not good for your gut microbiome. The last thing you want to do is actually take something that's give you a little incremental benefit and then add something harmful to it that could actually, you take 1 step forward and 2 or 3 steps back. You're not gaining anything. All right. So go for the real cheese. Go to a cheese store, or cheese section that specializes in cheese. I encourage you to explore. Like, actually, cheese is very tasty. It's not just on pizza. Like, really enjoy the texture of the cheese. You want the probiotic benefits of the cheese without getting too much saturated fat and without getting too big a hit of salt. All right. So we talked about yogurt, and I told you some of the cautions of yogurt and how to get the good stuff. We talked about cheese. And I told you why cheese is beneficial and what the evidence is. And I told you the specific types of cheese that could support health. And I also told you what to avoid. So are you ready for dairy product number 3 that can support health and therefore support your longevity? You're going to be surprised by this, but it's ice cream. That's right, ice cream. Now, anybody in their right mind would expect that ice cream increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, right? I mean, after all, ice cream's a dairy product. It's got saturated fat. Ice cream's sweet. It's got added sugar, right? And if you ever made ice cream, you know that you're adding sugar to it. And depending on what kind of ice cream it is and who makes it, there could be a lot of other ingredients added to it that might not be good for you. Artificial coloring, artificial flavoring, candies, little bits of things that are in it, swirls. You see these super, colorful, kaleidoscopic looking ice creams. Look, it's surprising that it would be actually good for you. However, despite all that, ice cream's actually been shown to decrease the risk of diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and cardiovascular disease. All conditions that you want to lower the risk of if you want longevity. All right. So what's the research? All right. Well, it actually has come poking out over the years, time and time and again. It's been shown that ice cream actually can have benefits. Researchers don't want to even believe the results. And some of the institutions where the research was done, they kind of discourage people from trying to publicize these types of findings. But it's called an observational study. It's been observed. So I want to tell you, in 2018, there was a doctoral student, somebody getting their PhD, that at Harvard School of Public Health, so, a high, top-notch university. And the researcher was looking at clinical data from 2 huge clinical databases to collect information on health and including diet, right? One database is called the Nurses Health Study with women. And the other one is called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study that contained data on men. So these were nurses and the women and doctors in the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. The studies began in the 1970s and the 1980s. They continued for about 20 years or so. Okay. And this particular researcher in 2018 looked at 16,000 people in these databases who had type 2 diabetes. All right. They already had type 2 diabetes. And they looked at what foods they were eating, including ice cream. And then they looked at their cardiovascular disease risk over time, right? And you would think that those people who ate more ice cream would actually have more heart disease, right? That's what I would have thought. And I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher. I would have actually hypothesized, like I would have thought that would certainly be true. However, the results were surprising, all right? The research found that those people who ate ice cream 2 or less times a week, all right, they got to eat ice cream 2 or less times. So not eating ice cream every day or twice a day, less than 2 times a week, all right, had a 12% lower risk of developing cardiovascular disease than those who didn't eat ice cream at all. Meaning if you ate some ice cream but only ate it twice a week, you actually decrease the risk of cardiovascular disease compared to people who just ate no ice cream at all. Surprising, right? Got to find an explanation for it. But when the data was looked at, analyzed by a number of people, like they were actually trying to say, this has got to be a mistake, or there must be some statistical error. Nope. It held up. Ice cream lowered the risk of cardiovascular disease. All right. And actually another study in 2014, 4 years earlier, showed that dairy products, including ice cream, actually was associated with a small decrease in the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. You'd think that something sugary and sweet like ice cream might increase your risk of diabetes. Nope. Actually decrease the risk of diabetes. All right. Now, you should ask yourself, how could this possibly be true? Right? As a researcher, we say, well, what's the mechanism of action? How does this all work out? Like it seems too good to be true. So maybe it's not true. Is there any possible explanation? Well, here's my explanation, my theory. My theory is that ice cream, which is cold ice, actually, when you eat it and gets into your stomach, guess what it does? It's like a bolus of cold down into your core, right? And that triggers the temperature sensors in your gut, in your esophagus, in your stomach. Your temperature sensors feel like there's something really cold coming down the hatch into the stomach, and that triggers brown fat to turn on thermogenesis. All right. Brown fat is a kind of good fat that is packed with mitochondria, and these mitochondria turn on when they're activated. So brown fat is activated by cold temperature. So ice cream coming down, activating temperature sensor turns on the brown fat to make more heat, right? To warm up the body, right? And that's a process called thermogenesis. I made another video talking about thermogenesis. Thermogenesis is thermo, heat, genesis, how to make heat. Brown fat is a good fat that can generate heat when stimulated by cold and other foods, but stimulated by cold in this case to turn on the heat-making capacity, all right? And so what do I give an example for what it's like? It's like if you have a gas stove in your kitchen, and you want to heat up some water or cook some soup, what do? You go to the knob and you turn it and it goes click, 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 whoosh, right? And then you've got a flame on your stovetop. And that's basically what brown fat does to trigger thermogenesis. Click, 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 whoosh. Now you got a flame. Now on the stove, the flame is actually being created because the system is drawing gas, fuel, from maybe a gas line or maybe a gas tank. And that's actually what's causing the burning. Now, when brown fat goes click, 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 whoosh, stimulated by cold temperatures, maybe like ice cream, this is my hypothesis on how all this works, all right, as a scientist, then where does it draw the fuel from? It draws the fuel to cause the warming, the thermogenesis, from harmful extra visceral fat. So the brown fat burns down the extra white fat, the visceral fat, the harmful fat, in order to be able to heat up the body. And that's my explanation, all right? Now, when you draw down and burn down the white fat, you're actually lowering inflammation. You're helping the fat hormones, actually like adiponectin and leptin, actually get back into mode, and that affects your appetite. So you're not eating so much. You're less likely to overeat. It also, adiponectin, when inflammation goes down, can function properly. What does adiponectin do? Is a fat-produced hormone that collaborates. It works together, hand in hand, with insulin in order to be able to draw glucose, blood glucose in for fuel. So what I'm actually saying is that my hypothesis of why ice cream could be beneficial for you is that it's cold, you eat it, it goes into your stomach, you're chilly on the inside, got to warm yourself up. It triggers the temperature sensor, the temperature alarms, which then says, we better heat up, guys. Brown fat is turned on, thermogenesis is turned on in order to generate that heat. Click, 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 whoosh. It actually has to draw that fuel down, form harmful extra body fat. And now you're burning down fat by eating ice cream and therefore lowering inflammation. That's one plausible explanation for actually lowering the risk for metabolic conditions, type 2 diabetes, and potentially also decreasing the risk for cardiovascular disease as well. So turning on thermogenesis burns down harmful body fat. This lowers inflammation, improves insulin sensitivity, overall improves your metabolic health. And this, it might be one explanation on how ice cream, as one of those dairy products to consider, could actually be helpful to improving your overall health and wellness and supporting longevity. Now, just like cheese, I'm going to tell you right now, big caveat. You're going to eat ice cream, do it only a little bit. Not even in moderation, I would say. Consider it a luxurious treat. All right? It's a special treat. Ice cream does have a lot of saturated fat, and it does have added sugar. Now, increased amounts of saturated fat and increased amounts of sugar can increase your risk of metabolic disease, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease. All that will compromise longevity. So again, we're talking about dairy products that can be helpful. I'm just pointing out the facts, all right? But don't you eat too much of that, because you're going to actually undo any benefits you have. All right. This is not a recommendation you eat a lot of cheese or ice cream, although I do recommend that you eat a lot of whole yogurt. But when it comes to ice cream, look, honestly, it's kind of good news, right? I mean, who doesn't like ice cream, right? But if you're going to eat ice cream, eat it. I encourage you to eat it rarely and consider it an indulgent treat. All right. I got a couple more things to say about ice cream. If you're going to eat ice cream, choose only the best quality ice cream. All right. Because you're not going to do it a lot anyway. Choose the ice cream that has only natural flavors, and look at the side of the ingredient label. No preservatives, no artificial flavoring, no artificial coloring. All right. And almost all ice cream has emulsifiers to thicken it. You might have a hard time avoiding that. So that's the other thing you got to be careful about. But you go to the grocery store, there's usually a big freezer section that's got a lot of different types of ice cream. Choose the ones that appeal to you, but pick them up and look at that ingredient label and look for signs of anything that you won't be comfortable with, especially those artificial additives that you don't want to put in your system. All right. No artificial coloring, no artificial flavoring, no artificial preservatives. All right. Want to make your own ice cream? Go for it. It's actually quite a lot of work. Might be really fun and rewarding to do it. So that's all I have to say about ice cream. Now, just to wrap up, let me just tell you again, dairy is not a no-no when it comes to health, and it's not a no-no when it comes to longevity. There's some evidence, as I told you, yogurt, cheese, and even ice cream, that eating a little bit of it can be good for you. Now, for yogurt, actually eating it regularly definitely can be actually good for you. But dairy is a source of protein, which you need as you get older. So, that's another thing to consider. Longevity requires a good support of protein. Dairy is one way of doing it. You can get plant-based proteins, but dairy is another way. Dairy is also a source of vitamin D. Most of us don't get enough vitamin D. Vitamin D builds strong bones. Vitamin D is important for immunity, to protect us from invaders from the outside, bacteria and viruses, and good strong immune system also protects us from cancer, microscopic cancers inside our body. Good immune system wipes those out. And vitamin D has also been associated with reducing the risk of dementia. And it's hard to get a lot of vitamin D just, from plant-based foods alone. So if you eat dairy products, eating a little bit of these dairy products can actually be good for you for those reasons. All right. Now, obviously, you can take a supplement for vitamin D as well. Now, in my book, dairy isn't just another way to have a diverse diet. But of course, you're a vegan, you can avoid it completely. But if you do eat dairy, I'm just telling you, have it in moderation. All right. It could help you support your health and achieve your goals for longevity. Obviously, don't eat it if you've got an allergy to milk products or dairy products, then you want to avoid it. If you have lactose intolerance, sure, you can take Lactaid, which is an enzyme to break down the thing that you might be intolerant to, the lactose. But at that point, just ignore it. That's what I think. All right. Okay, that's it. We covered a lot of stuff. I bet you didn't think that I would actually be able to give you that much information about dairy products that can support your health. But I hope you learned something new. And thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Hi there. If you enjoyed watching this video, I know you'll love the next one. Stay here and check it out, and I'll see you there.